Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. Health and finance stories are again highlights in the January issue of The Beacon. Stuart Rosenthal, publisher of this wonderful publication, is here to give us these and other stories. Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce has set a number of goals to achieve during the upcoming Maryland General Assembly session. Ilaya Hopkins, Vice President of Public Affairs for the Chamber, is here to tell us what the Chamber wants to achieve this year. As the number of students in Montgomery County Public Schools continues to increase, many of the classrooms are becoming overcrowded, and we have far too many students in portable classrooms. Doug Prouty, President of the Montgomery County Educational Association, will explain what can be done about the situation, what MCEA is trying to do. There are changes in the annual Capital Improvement Program report for the county schools and how the number of students are calculated and their proportion in the classrooms. Jane DeWinter, who regularly comments for this show, is here to tell us her thoughts on this issue and hopefully other related issues as well. Stuart, I got to tell you, this is wonderful. You are in the captain chair here.
I am very excited.
You're our lead up. You're usually over.
That's right. I'm usually bottom of the heap.
You started, I know, fourth, and then you moved up to third. You've been in second for a while, and now here you are. A lot of pressure on you. What's going on in this month's Beacon?
Oh, right. Well, actually, this combines both our technology section and our health section. There's an article about an experimental device being developed by the Google X Lab. That's where they're doing all the incredibly interesting things like the driverless car and stuff. This is very interesting. They had an engineer at Google who was riding his bike to work and got hit by a car. Okay, so he goes to the hospital, they're checking him out, and they're doing this, and they find, to their surprise, he's got a tumor on his kidney they would not have otherwise known. And boy, it's exciting being here.
Right.
And as a result, they said, we really have to do something about this. People have these things happening in them, and there's no diagnostic tool to find these things early on.
It shouldn't be just like some sort of accident that brings it on.
Right. Why? Because there must be people who aren't going to be that lucky to have, in a sense, lucky to have an accident to show this. So they've developed, and they're in the process of developing, well, they call it a pill, but really it's a capsule that holds 2,000 nanoparticles, 2,000 of which will fit in a single cell. So they're microscopic particles.
Wow.
They are coated with antibodies for different proteins and different cells in the system. The idea is you swallow this and they travel through your body, through your bloodstream, and they pick up on the early signs of cancers and other problems in your body and transmit this information to a sensor outside the body, and it goes to your doctor. And then it's like a perfect, not perfect, but it should be a very helpful diagnostic tool.
Not very invasive.
Yeah, and to find things that you couldn't find with a regular blood test or whatever, because it's the kind of thing that would be very expensive to do otherwise with multiple tests for looking at all kinds of things. And here, one pill can find everything you want.
Some of the promise of biotech that we've heard with the nanotechnology and all of that, that should go
It could be dangerous with it too. Of course, it's very experimental. It's early stage. It hasn't been tested in humans, but this is the idea. I think it's a very exciting possibility.
Fantastic. What's another story?
Well, more down to earth. Okay, we get fresh produce.
Well, down to earth. Wait, down to earth, because I know your cover story is
about astronauts. Yes, that wasn't meant to be.
So it's good to down to earth, but let's go to vegetables.
Okay, good. It's an interesting cover story, but I wasn't going to talk about it today. But cool guy. So vegetables. You get fresh vegetables. How do you maintain as many of the nutrients as possible?
I don't know.
Okay, well,
some
of this information is probably well known, but we've learned different things over the years, and some of it seems counterintuitive or contradictory. Do you chop a vegetable small or do you not? Well, it depends on the vegetable. A lot of things, when you chop them up, you're exposing them to more air and light and heat, and therefore they degrade the nutrients. On the other hand, onions and garlic and leeks, those things actually, their antioxidants are boosted by being exposed to the air. So you are supposed to chop those or smash those small and let them sit for 10 minutes before you cook. So it's this kind of thing.
And that's kind of interesting because nowadays people can go to the grocery store and get all kinds of stuff already cut up for convenience. So some of that, I mean,
Some of
in
that
terms
is not
of
good, yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, fresh vegetables are nice and having them easily available is nice, but the truth is once they've been cut and once they're off the vine, well, they start to degrade with time. So frozen vegetables tend to be frozen right there within, you know, an hour of being picked, and that preserves 90 to 95% of the nutrients in those. But then you could also boil those in water and kill them too. So
and I heard something else on an NPR story with the frozen fruits is that less pesticide residue on frozen than on fresh. But I know that Ilya's got something she wants to throw in there.
Well, that would be a really interesting article, as the others too. Where do you get the beacon? Is it delivered to people, or do you?
Well, we do sell subscriptions for delivery, but it's a free publication. It's available at 1,500 free sites around the metropolitan area.
Oh, great.
We're in drugstores and grocery stores and senior centers and libraries and doctors' offices and churches and synagogues.
And how frequently is it published?
Monthly. Once a month. So you can either, if you don't find us somewhere near you, then give us a call at our office. We're in the phone book, and we'll tell you where you can pick up a copy near where you
And one of the high points of each edition is his commentary.
Yeah, very
With
good.
his handsome face on there and talking
yes,
about
he has
the
a
issue of the
column.
day.
I wanted to go back to the Google,
Yes.
whatever it's called, the Google capsule, or.
Yeah.
So I know that, like with regard to mammograms, people talk about, well, you don't really want to give mammograms necessarily to all young women because you'll find things that aren't really worth looking at. And there's other kinds of cancers too that they think that, well, it's not necessarily great to know about it early because then it.
because we can't do anything
Right,
about
because
it.
you can't do anything about it, or it doesn't matter because it's still going to take 40 years to kill you.
Right.
So are there concerns that having this technology is going to create a whole lot of other
It's a
medical expenses?
very good question. I'm sure that once it gets developed to the point where it's actually going to be used, they will say, you know, there's some data which your doctor will share with you and some data which you probably won't, or he'll counsel you about what you should and shouldn't do. It really depends on whether it's something you can do something about. There are conditions, like you say, that we really can't help.
I'm curious about
We've
whether
got
or
about
not.
50 seconds left. Okay.
So do they know if the nanoparticles will wash out of you at some point?
That's my question. My question
Yeah.
is, you know, what are the side effects of having these microscopic particles in your body? What else could they do?
Right.
So that's been a concern with other nanoparticles. But I understand, I mean, I'm not a doctor, and I'm only reporting on what we read, but a lot of things that were early concerns about those have been assuaged in recent experiments, but this will take a lot of study. It's not going to be available at a drugstore near you very soon, I'm sure.
Well, it's an interesting topic to bring up, though, because there is so much happening in the life sciences in Montgomery County and Maryland, and so it's these kinds of new ideas and innovation and entrepreneurs who can bring this research to the marketplace that is really exciting for Montgomery County.
And that's a very good point, because Google also says it's not going to develop this. They are coming up with the ideas in their X lab, and then they're going to license them to individual companies to market. So that's exactly, could be a good opportunity for Montgomery County.
What a great segue, because we need to license the next segment and get started here. Good opportunity for Ilaya Hopkins of Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Stuart. Ilaya,
Well,
welcome back.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. It's an exciting time for the Chamber, for the state of Maryland, as the General Assembly gets underway this week. And we are always looking at new opportunities and new industries that we can bring to diversify our economy and keep our quality of life strong for our schools, transportation, environment, all of those things.
Give us a little bit of a preview. We had, the last time we had a divided Annapolis was 8 years ago. 12 years ago was the beginning of that session with Bob Ehrlich, with the Democratic Senate, Democratic Assembly. What do we anticipate with Larry Hogan and?
We're all waiting to see. Of course, the General Assembly started yesterday, January 14th. He will be sworn in on January 21st. So he has technically not started his job, and he's been keeping things fairly close to the vest.
There's a website, by the way, people can be watching this reading while we're.
We publish our advocacy work on our website at mcccmd.com.
Okay.
And we work at the federal, state, and county level. But with the General Assembly underway, that's where our focus is right now. He has made some appointments, which we're really looking forward to. He's picked some very good people for the Department of Business and Economic Development. Our Senator Rona Kramer from Montgomery County will be Secretary of Aging if confirmed. So we don't know much beyond that because he's kept policies and priorities.
And we don't know anything about him either because he's not been a legislator.
No,
Ehrlich
he's
had
not
a
been.
whole record. This guy has no record.
He's not held elected office, although he has been very engaged and involved in his community and in his business.
A lot of words, but never having to actually vote on it.
Doesn't have a voting record. Right. That's right. So 100% change at the executive branch, but it's also important to note that in the General Assembly there are a lot of changes as well. While that leadership hasn't shifted too much, there are changes in the balance between Democrats and Republicans. Republicans picked up seats in both the Senate and the House. Okay. And we have a number of new legislators, others who have never legislated before, in new positions. In Montgomery County, we have 5 delegates and 1 new senator who used to be a House of delegates.
And of course, a senator for many times, and she finally succeeded.
And Susan Lee as well moved from the House to the Senate. So for us, for our chamber and for our members, what we're really going to be focusing on this year is establishing relationships with these new folks, reacquainting ourselves with old friends and people that are now in new positions, and working with other organizations, like-minded organizations.
So do you think that there's a message? I mean, I'm just thinking it's interesting. I mean, we've had a lot of surprise and discussion about how Larry Hogan got elected in the first place, but hearing that, okay, he's never held elected office, he has no record, and then people aren't even really sure about what his policies or goals are. Is there a message in the fact that, okay, with kind of being a blank slate, that he can get elected?
You know, we're working, we are not a political organization. We like to say we're not R's or D's, we're C for commerce, and we work with who is in the position to be making decisions. So we like to be a resource to legislators and to the broader community on impacts that ideas that they're thinking about would have on the business community. His message during his campaign was pretty clear. He wants to create more opportunity for people and businesses in Maryland to grow the tax base and to continue to have the quality of life that we have. We think that strategic investments in capital spending is really critical to that, to keep our competitive edge, whether it's schools or the transportation infrastructure. But there is room for improvement for Maryland to be competitive within the region and in the global economy.
Fascinating. I mean, you're going to be spending a lot of time in Annapolis, I would imagine. What, for you personally, as you're looking ahead these sessions, and by the way, again, with the General Assembly still in session, I mean, now in session, Governor O'Malley is still governor. The Democrats can't pass a bunch of laws and signed by Governor O'Malley before Hogan becomes governor? And that would be a trick, wouldn't it?
Well, and Governor O'Malley has made some executive decisions in these last weeks, as we've seen.
But how are you going to personally spend your time?
You know, making sure that we are there as a resource for legislators as they're deliberating. They've introduced over 2,500 bills in 90 days. So sure, they can introduce stuff in these couple of weeks. On every one of them? No, our chamber, through our board of directors and our advocacy committee, you know, reviews things that are important to the competitiveness of our business and our economy. So we comment on approximately 100 pieces of legislation. But you know, making sure that we know what they're working on, we're providing resource where needed, and looking to other organizations to where we can come together to support common interests.
Prediction, we've got about 10 seconds. Prediction for this session.
It's about the budget, and I don't think we're going to see any major pieces of legislation going through. Remember, this is the beginning of a 4-year term, so it's the long game.
Okay, long game. We're in a marathon, or at least 5,000 meters. We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. Look, Prouty, welcome back. It's been some time since you were here, I think.
Yep. Glad to be here.
Montgomery County Education Association. You all are our teachers, our workforce in our schools, the most important resource we have in our schools.
Well, thank you for saying so. Yeah,
absolutely true.
Over 12,000 certificated employees of MCPS who are not administrators.
Well, I like to call them the dark side.
The administrators.
My wife is a vice principal, so I call her the dark side all the time. But
we need good people everywhere.
Yes,
I'll say that.
So your challenges right now, you know, you've got schools, you've got overcrowding, you've got working conditions for your teachers. Your teachers want these kids to do great.
Yep. We like to think of it as learning conditions. Yeah.
And so where are we on this?
So things are crowded. We get about 2,500 more kids every year. And there's not enough space for the kids we have now, so there are a lot of kids in portables. And teachers make do. There's ways to be able to improve the environment. There's ways to be able to make sure the kids are comfortable, establishing good classroom environment. But the fact is, we need more space. And so there's going to be a big push in the legislature this year to try to put together a program for Montgomery, Prince George's, and Baltimore County to get more investment to be able to build more for school space. Right now in Montgomery County, the middle of the county, moving up from Silver Spring up through Germantown and Gaithersburg is where the most growth is. And it's also the most dense part of the county. So the challenge is not only to be able to improve the schools we have already, renovate them, rehabilitate them, but also to find new space to build schools.
Now, aren't a lot of these places, don't a lot of these communities, aren't there a lot of former schools that are now in the community? Can we get those schools back, or is that?
There are some that are still, the property is owned by MCPS, and so we can develop those. There's others that have been put to other uses, and the folks who use them for other purposes like having the facilities, and so it's it's a wrangling to be able to do that. But there's also just a need for more space as well. And the question right now in a lot of places is, when you build a new school, do you build out? In the way that normal schools are, like a 2-story building with lots of surrounding space, or in a lot of urban areas, and a lot of the center of the county is urban, you can build up. And the question is how you can do that or not.
So can you explain a little bit why the state legislator has to get involved in local school construction dollars?
Well, the way that school construction works is it's a bonded source of revenue to be able to start the construction, because it comes out over a period of years.
So how does that work?
So there's an authorization to be able to create the bond. And that comes at the state level, and the state has to back that up.
And then the bond is sold in the market.
Right. And then
people then get a level of interest out of that.
Right. And so the state has to be able to provide the money to be able to make the bonds possible in the first place. And over the period of 2009 till quite recently, when revenues were down across the board at the county and the state level, the funding wasn't there to be able to do that to the extent that we need. So there was a push to build more during that period because construction costs were down. People were looking for work, so there were better deals to be had. But at the same time, the space, there wasn't enough then, and we need the space now. So there'll be a big push to have the state commit some money to be able to do more construction everywhere, especially in the 3 areas I mentioned, but across the board. And the locals need to also kick in money to be able to do that.
Who pays the interest on the bonds?
That's where primarily the money comes from.
From the state?
It's from the state.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And why is this new? We couldn't see it coming, that there are going to be more students every year?
We do see it coming, and we've known it was going to happen, and we've been talking about this for quite some time now. So it's not a new issue, but it's reaching the point now where there are more and more schools that are overcrowded, more and more kids in portables, which is, it can be done, but it's not an ideal environment.
Plus you can't expect, predict that surge of kids coming from Central America this summer either, many of whom have come here. Yes.
Right. Well, and also we have such a backlog too of projects that Montgomery County is, I don't know if we're 100% unique, but we've forward funded a lot. When you look at, the state actually owes us a lot of money for things that we've already built.
Yeah.
And will we see that money?
We'll see, hopefully. Yeah.
What are we going to, will the county, is this one of these things, as Governor-elect Hogan talks about cutting back, we want a quality of life, we want to continue to do things in Montgomery County, whether forward funding, whatever. Aren't we going to be looking at a situation where we're going to go further and further in the hole vis-a-vis the state, or not?
I would suspect not, but we'll have to see. What we're hoping for is that Governor Hogan realizes that the quality of life is important here as everywhere else, and the reason why we are business friendly is because of the quality of life. So great schools are one of the primary reasons people come to an area. We have the best in the country here, and I think we have the best in the state in Montgomery County. So spending investment really in schools pays off long term.
And that's why the strategic investment in capital spending is one of our priorities and has been for a number of years. We want good schools for that educated workforce.
Well, again, good segue. Doug, thank you for this, because now we come to Jane DeWinter.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
We're going to continue this education discussion. Tell us what's on your mind.
Right. Well, Don kind of introduced it by talking about part of the decision about whether you're building a school out or up. and probably most people don't realize that within the capital improvements plan that was, you know, for when the board had public comment and then they've approved it and it's now at the county council level, were changes in their long-range planning process, which for elementary and middle schools decreased the optimal site size. In other words, the number of acreage. Schools had a sort of a rule of thumb about this is the right number of acres, and there really has been a lot of pressure to decrease that because of the difficulty of finding those large pieces of land. So the site size for elementary school was decreased by more than a third. And middle schools by about 25%, and on the other hand, high schools were increased from 30 to 35 acres. But at the same time, the school system also issued new guidelines for the optimal size of schools, size measured in students. So high schools went from being optimally sized between 1,200 to 2,000 to now 1,600 to 2,400. So.
Well, look at, I mean, impact of the sizing, elementary school, middle schools, you know, the ability for kids to be able to play, to have exercise out. I mean, you're talking about really reducing that amount. Is that part of this whole thing?
Yeah, that's part of it. And I know that there's been a lot. I mean, I went to a talk last week with Casey Anderson, the new head of the Park and Planning Commission, and he was talking about he thought elementary schools could fit on 3 or 4 acres. Well, the school system has now reduced it to 7.5 with a caveat if it's a level site, if it works well.
I need to talk to Casey.
Right. Well, I mean, and there's some thought about, okay, well, let's just go like we do in the city and put our whole playground on the roof. But I don't really think that Montgomery County is quite there, that people are going to feel okay about just sending a 7-year-old down the street to climb up to the top of a 4-story building to play. I mean, there is a sense that kids do need this space for recess and PE, but I think it's also important to think about the school as a community asset, because kids go there after school to play. It's not just, I mean, you can regulate, you can keep track of the kids during PE if they're on a roof with a fenced-in area, but after school, you're taking that out of the mix.
That image is just so sad to me, that somewhere in Bethesda or Silver Spring, our kids are up on the 4th floor behind a cage. And it's,
there are some great examples in the county of co-locating a school next to a park. Gaithersburg comes to mind, and while we're dealing with a very restricted, we're dealing with a restricted, built-out environment. I think it's great that your organization and others are starting to be creative in how we're going to maximize the space that we do have. You know, people are attracted to this area for the schools. We have the opportunity to build sustainable buildings in new ways that allow for the physical education, but also fitting in the community.
But you know, it's also a difficulty because, say, example, in White Flint, there is a park in White Flint that actually was tagged as a future school site, and that's where, you know, a lot of people wanted to put the school because it was a small site and it could be adjacent to the park, and the local residents were able to stop that. And so the school site current school site is extremely small and is bound by roads on all sides.
Not in my backyard. Those kids coming in, they're maybe up to no good.
Right.
Well, they're mostly probably the MCEA members.
Right. Yeah.
You know about them. Oh boy.
Well, and there is something because the school system is saying that teachers can't park on across the street and walk across. And during the discussion, the school system was saying, but our buses could let kids off there. And so I was like, okay, so you're okay letting a 6-year-old cross this access road, but not the teacher. So there's some issues there. Well, I just wanted to quickly bring up one other change,
about a minute,
which is that the school also, when it's looking at the growth policy and the degree to which schools are overcrowded, they have certain ratios that, okay, if you have this number of kids, you need this many classrooms. And we have over half of our elementary schools are called class size reduction schools, which means they get lower class sizes. Well, the school system has increased the amount of kids who are officially can be in one of these kindergarten classes and first and second grade classes, so that all of these schools that are class size reduction schools will, with no change in student population, all of a sudden find themselves statistically less crowded than they were before.
But no assistants coming in, no aides coming in to help the teacher with a larger number of kids.
No, but I mean, you're really talking about going from a class of, I mean, the classes already have gotten bigger. since the lowest.
But it's
budget.
important to remember the influx of students is also bringing a new mix of students with increased needs, and so the numbers don't tell the full story.
Right.
And increased opportunities, because we're sitting
Absolutely.
on the globe more and more.
There you go. Yeah.
Last thought, we got about 5 seconds left.
Support schools no matter who you are.
Indeed.
Yeah.
We can all get behind that.
Beacon can be behind that too.
All in.
Thank goodness we're all together on this. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. And I want to thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Mooers, inviting you to please join us right here next week at this very same time.